Hey, welcome to It's So Easy. My name is Courtney McCrone. I am the head skidette, designer, and owner of 23 Skidoo Clothes, and today we're going to be focusing on 1950s details. So here are some of my designs that I've sewed and I made the patterns, designed, and sewed myself. So what we're going to be looking at is what you can see is with this dress and many of these other ones, I used the same exact pattern, but I just added little details to make it a totally different look. So with this dress, it's a plaid flannel fabric with the trimming and a gold Peter Pan collar, perfect for the modern day woman. And then this dress is the same exact pattern, except I just changed little details. So I changed the fabric into a chiffon with the lining. So with the chiffon, what I did was I made French seams, which is an enclosed seam to make it very clean. And then I added really whimsical trims to make it youthful and nostalgic of the 1950s. This dress is the same pattern again, but I used different fabric to make it a little bit fancier with the lace and the lining and the gold collar. This one I also added gold cuffs to add a little bit of youthfulness and just for the modern day woman. And this dress is the same exact pattern again, except it's got stretchiness, so it can be casual and dressed up or dressed down, and same with the gold collar and gold cuffs. Now these blouses I made are also from the same exact pattern as the dresses, but what I did for these was I shortened the hem length by several inches so that it's not a dress anymore, it's a blouse. And so for these, it's the same blouse, but I used two different trims. So this one's a little bit thinner and this one's a little bit wider. So it makes it this one's a little bit more youthful, where this one's a little dressier. And then here I just used the single trim instead of the double layering of the trims. Now moving on to this pattern, I made this pattern from the same one as those shift dresses, except I took in the waist a little bit so it's fitted and really feminine-like. And then I added gathering and then also pockets. And actually all of my dresses have pockets because since it's for the modern woman, you gotta keep your phone and your keys somewhere. And then using that same pattern, I made this dress. And this dress, I designed the fabric with a friend. It's telling a story about fleeing to the best city in the entire world, Cleveland, Ohio. And what I did here was I just took off the sleeves and then added gathering, so it was just on the side. So it's really feminine, really youthful, whimsical. And then I added the bow detailing as well, which makes it super 1950s, but perfect for the modern day woman. Now over here, what I did was I used a straight line gingham fabric to make a little shift dress with the gathering. So I added both of the 1950s details. And then what I did was for these heart-shaped pockets, I put the grain on the bias so that the fabric, the pattern on the fabric pops just a little bit. So today what we're going to be working on is making these heart-shaped pockets with the bow detail. And I already sewed the apron, but what we're going to focus on are the 1950s details of the pocket and the bow. So you can create your own heart shape, and I cut mine out. You cut two of the same fabrics, and I use the straight grain of this gingham. So what I'm going to do is start where the straightest edge is, which is right here, and I'm going to just go all the way around using a 2.5 stitch length. And I'm putting the wrong sides together. So I'm going to back stitch and then keep on going, and then right at the corner, you make sure that your needle's in, and then you can lift up your foot to pivot it. And then just keep on going, and be sure to take your time. There's no need to rush. And if you have really slippery fabrics, you can use pins to keep them together. So I'm going to stop right there and back stitch. Okay. So now that I got that, you're going to want to trim the seam allowance, and I'm going to use these pinking shears. The most important part to trim is right where it's concaved and pointed. So I'm going to start doing that. And I actually already have one that's already trimmed out, and I trimmed all the way around it. So now that I've got that, now that you used your pinking shears, you can open up where you left the seam allowance, or where you left the opening. You're gonna turn it inside out. So I'm just gonna do that, and you're gonna make sure to open up every corner and every part of where it's at. So I'm gonna use the turner to help me do that a little bit. So you'll see now why I use the pinking shears. If you use straight scissors, that's fine, but you might accidentally cut into your stitch. So I use the pinking shears to create a lot of room in here so that when I iron it down, it'll be nice and flat where it's concaved, and so there won't be any excess fabric anywhere. So once you iron that down, it should look something like this, and it should look nice and flat and relaxed in every part of it. So now we're gonna put that aside and work on the bow. So for the bow, I just cut out 2 rectangle pieces, and you're gonna put them together like you did right side with the heart shape. And you're gonna start on the straightest edge, which all the edges are straight, but I'm gonna start on the longest piece. So I'm gonna start right there. And then back stitch again so that when you turn it inside out, the seam doesn't open up. It's really important that when you're at each corner, your needle is in the fabric so that it makes a really nice point. And that's called needle in the down position. And then once again, I see the start of my stitches coming up, so I'm going to want to keep an eye on that so that I'm going to leave about 1 inch of room so that I can open it up like I did with the heart shape. So for this one, I'm not going to use the pinking shears since there aren't any curved seams. So I'm just going to use the straight shears, and I'm going to clip right at the corners. And the reason I do that is because I'm going to turn it inside out, and the corners will be nice and pointed so there isn't any excess fabric there. So I already have this all turned inside out and ironed down. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my stitch length to a 4.0 from a 2.5. And I'm going to fold this in half and kind of make a crease with my fingers so I can see right where the center is. And I'm going to use that as my guide. So I'm going to start right in the center and just sew all the way down with this really long stitch. And then you don't want to trim the thread too close to the fabric, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top stitch thread and I'm going to pull on it. And what this is going to do is gather the bow, or gather the fabric to make that bow shape. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make a knot so that it keeps that heart shape, or that bow shape. And then I'm going to change the stitch length back to 2.5. And I got my heart pocket here. And I'm going to place this right there. I'm just going to hold it down with my fingers. You can also use pins if you like. I like to use my fingers. And then I'm just going to stitch right over that so it's nice and secure. Oops. Okay. And I'm going to use a back stitch so it stays on there nice. Okay. Now what you're going to do, now that I've got my bow on there, once you sew it onto the apron, because there's that open seam there, you're going to just sew right over it and nobody will ever even know. So let's take a look at this apron. What I did was I added a straight seamed waistband to it. So it's super easy, it's for anybody. And the reason I wanted to do an apron was because it was very popular in the culture of the 1950s. Any woman would wear them, every woman wore them, and you can wear them over a dress, you can use it in the kitchen, obviously. And just the details is what makes it super 1950s. So with the heart-shaped pocket and then the scalloped edges, I didn't even have to use a pattern. So you can just do it free-handed. And with what you learned with the heart-shaped pocket, you can use that same technique for each scallop. So just take your time on each curve, make it very smooth, pivot right at the corners, and then use your pinking shears to trim off all the excess seam allowance. And once you have that, you can add 1950s details to any of your garments.